I'm so happy for those of you who have been able to join us. If you can't hear me, if you're having any technical issues, please let us know in the chat. We have had a glitch with the translation, so we may not be able to provide simultaneous translation tonight. However, this is being recorded and taped and simulcast on Revere TV tonight. So we will
Recording in progress.
we will provide a Spanish translation and any other translations if people can let us know what they need in the chat, and we will presume that Spanish speakers may be hoping to join us and hopefully are not going to be out of the loop with us here tonight. I'm going to get started. Laura Holmes, Revere Housing Coalition. I appreciate you all for taking time out of this beautiful evening to be with us and learn more about what's going on with housing issues in Revere. As always, we start by sharing our Revere Housing Coalition mission, which is that we are a resident-led volunteer and membership group advocating for fair housing. We believe that housing is a human right, and we organize for fair, affordable, and diverse housing to meet the needs of people of different incomes, abilities, household types, and stages of life. When we started this coalition back in 2020, we very quickly learned how important it is to educate ourselves so that we can understand the issues and be involved as our city makes decisions that will impact our communities and our families for generations to come. And we will definitely learn a lot from the presenters you're going to hear from this evening. I will just give you a brief overview and welcome the panelists to introduce yourselves more fully when it's your time up. We're going to start with Whitney Demetrius from CHAPA, who's going to sort of lay the groundwork and give us the big picture view of what's going on in the state and region and things that and how these things connect with what we're trying to accomplish in Revere. After Whitney, we'll have a few minutes for brief questions, and we'll have a larger time for questions at the end of the meeting. After Whitney, we'll hear from Lorena Escalero, who's going to give us a terrific presentation about zoning reform and the top strategies and recommendations that came out of our recently completed housing production plan. The Revere Housing Coalition was very involved in that, as were many of you, I hope. And after that, we're going to hear from Tom Squierzowski, whose name I still have not learned how to say properly, but he'll straighten me out on that again. And he is going to talk to us about some new programs coming to the city as well. And Laura Christopher is going to talk to us about the Community Land Trust study group that we have been participating in for several months now, and we'll get an update about that. So we have a packed agenda. We want everybody to feel welcome and included. We are informal, but we are also, we've got a lot of material to get through. So let's try and stick to the agenda and kick it off with you, Whitney.
Thanks so much, Laura, and everyone a part of the Revere Housing Coalition. It's certainly a pleasure and full circle moment in some ways to join you guys tonight in community and for this to be broadcast. So please allow this to be me. You see me applauding you and work that you're doing, and certainly thrilling to be able to join you in conversation to give an overall picture on the Affordable Homes Act, historical piece of legislation for us to make note of and attention to in many ways. Applaud you all, right, in helping us advocating for this particular bill. So it's certainly a historical time, and it's my pleasure to see so many of you all here. As we all participated in CHAPA's Municipal Engagement Initiative program, we are still here. We're still here to support you in many ways. And so I hope you continue to use this as a resource as you've been part of our ongoing work in our Making the Case efforts, which really oftentimes are advocating and pushing for these things throughout the year. So it is my pleasure to come back now and say thank you for helping us to get this far on this work together, right? CHAPA is a nonprofit organization that started back in the civil rights movement, right? It started with a collective of community members, much like yourself, that said during that time of the civil rights movement, it was important to put housing at the forefront and to advocate for those policies and programs that was essential for the Commonwealth. And so at CHAPA, we continue to strive to do just that in our work. And it's a pleasure to do that alongside each of you all. So our goal really is about, at CHAPA has been kind of focusing on building and creating and sustaining 200,000 homes and thriving communities by 2030. And so the Affordable Homes Act, which was signed back in August, was really pivotal and historical in many ways, right? It was the sort of first of its kind in many ways, including so many policies, in addition to the dollars connected to the real work. And so again, it's a time for us to really pay close attention to the pieces of that. Back in 2018, the bond bill was looking to had brought $1.8 billion, and this year's bond bill was a little over 5.1 billion, right? So it's a significant increase in the amount. Of course, we have to account for cost and inflation and those sort of things, but over that 5-year period of time, it's a significant increase. And so I'll go over just a few of these to not get too into the granular, but to share many of the pieces here with you all. You'll notice here 1599-1953 talks about local designated projects. Basically, the legislature lumped a number of asks from the various legislators within this to support projects locally across the state. So instead of having the one-off request that legislators have been working on, they lumped it into this a little over $400 million for local designated projects. And then you'll also note here the home modification loan program, which was funded at around the same amount as in 2018, which is helping individuals who are looking for home loans who have a disability, right, to allow for monies to do modifications on their home. In addition to that, I wanted to highlight the Affordable Housing Trust. I know many of you all are participating in the local Affordable Housing Trust, and so there's 800 allocated for that in this program. I wanted to highlight just a few more as well. The Housing Stabilization Fund, which was increased from 150 to 425. This is to ensure that people are able to stabilize their housing. You'll see a significant increase around public housing as well. In particular, we have been advocating for and understanding that public housing had been significantly under supported and underfunded. And so there's been a lot of advocacy in the last year to ensure that there is money to create and sustain that housing. And so we're excited to see that $2 billion allocated for public housing. A few other things I wanted to just allocate here is about the public housing demonstration, which basically covers administrative costs. So to ensure that public housing can kind of get built, understanding that administration is sort of a separate cost from the money actually going to directly towards the housing. So I wanted to highlight that. And then also we have the, the Commonwealth Builder. A few of these you'll note were not necessarily funded under the 2018 bond bill. And but it really just meant that it was monies came from other spaces. For instance, to the Commonwealth Builder, there was ARPA funding that was allocated to support the Commonwealth Builder, which is basically monies that were put together for addressing communities minoritized communities that have been supported in terms of housing opportunities. And so creating funding here specifically in the bond bill to support that. So again, it was previously funded under the Economic Development Bill a few years ago. And so it's important that we've been hearing advocacy to continue this sort of funding, to continue these sorts of programs to support home ownership in communities that have been directly impacted and disinvested, and so excited for that as well. And in addition to that, just thinking about advocates sort of are utilizing the housing bill, the bond bill rather, to sort of slowly create projects like these to support more housing and more opportunity. Without getting too into the weeds, because I'm not sure how much time I have, and again, I'll be here to answer lots of the questions. A few others that I wanted to highlight as well, but I'll come back to this slide in just a moment. So again, understanding that in 2018, there was about $1.8 billion, and this year's 5.1 is a significant change, right? And the bond bill basically is sort of like a credit card of sorts, right? That allows the governor to issue bonds and borrow money for capital projects, specifically for housing. So it's to say that that 5.1 could potentially be used for housing, and usually about 2/3 of that amount actually goes out. But really, again, to highlight and reemphasize that this is really a historical bill of its kind, and it's us really moving in the right direction, seeing that really now is the moment to be putting these things forward and seeing lots of success here. So I'll talk about the community investment tax credit, which went up this year from the last bond bill from 12 to 15 million. The home ownership production tax credit, which is brand new this year, which gave 10 million, and the historic rehabilitation tax credit at $110 million, which was doubled from 55 in previous years. So really understanding this idea of ensuring that developers have the tools that's necessary in creating affordable housing and creating more housing opportunities. So we oftentimes are hearing that it's hard to get the deals done. And so these pieces are really built in to the Affordable Homes Act to incentivize developers actually getting it done and stabilizing communities. Again, this is a first of its kind, where oftentimes we'll talk about these other pieces I just went over. There's been many priorities also included in the Affordable Homes Act. So we've been excited to see that there's an establishment of the State Office of Fair Housing and the Fair Housing Trust Fund. So thank you all for your particular advocacy in helping support the newly established office and the trust fund that passed in the bond bill. We're excited to see this for a number of reasons, because it's going to ensure, much like your mission that is centered around fair housing, that there's going to be an office dedicated to ensuring the duty to affirmatively further fair housing, to support local fair housing committees and commissions across the state, to fund projects around testing and mystery shopping in the housing market, to uncover acts of discrimination, to do education and outreach so that people know their fair housing rights and what they have access to around fair housing, to be a place where it can house data and reports. So excited to see that as part of the bond bill as well. And then also, the first of its kind, again, will be the statewide housing plan. And so the governor basically put this in as a newer policy, which will be established into law in perpetuity, so even after her administration, that ensures that there is a statewide housing plan. And part of that, what's going to be important is that there'll be, of course, for housing looped into that. There'll be so much of a plan like you all are currently doing your housing production plan, thinking about that. There'll be one on the statewide level, which is super, super important. In addition, there'll be the supportive housing pool fund, which is going to support and ensure this need for individuals who are suffering from homelessness, that when they that their housing has the supportive services that they need. The eviction record sealing ensures that under certain circumstances, you can issue to have your eviction record sealed so that it does not inhibit you from future housing opportunities. And there are several commissions as well included in the act, which is what's great about those commissions. You'll notice here extremely low income, senior housing, and accessible housing is that there'll be a report that's due, right? So not just a commission, but a real report and an account for what their findings around these issues, which I know is an issue and a concern for the Revere Housing Coalition. So we'll be leaning upon and supporting and sharing those reports with you, which I think is going to really inform so much of the work and hopefully also inform the housing plans and much of the work that comes out of the state, as well as the funding. Then lastly, the Healthy Homes program to, again, ensure that asbestos and addressing the older housing stock in Massachusetts and all of those things gets addressed. What's important here also is not just what was in the bond bill, but what was not in the bond bill. So there have been many attempts to weaken the protections around 40B, Chapter 40B, which we know has been a crucial piece in creating affordable housing opportunities in the state. And so the legislator is strong support of keeping the protections of 40B, as well as the protections under MBTA Communities Act, which was also, again, had attempts to roll back and to withdraw. And so the legislator coming out strongly, so certainly want to applaud them in doing that as well. And so also what's upcoming for us as we look forward, where of course there was pieces around ADUs, which I want to talk a little bit about. I imagine folks will have questions. It's really going to be, as we move forward, the implementation of the Affordable Homes Act, right? Now that all of those various pieces are there, how do we ensure that it gets done? So leaning upon it, you all as advocates, to ensure that when the housing plan rolls around, when the commissions come out with their reports, when housing, to ensure that these things are happening on the ground. And then lastly as well, just thinking about the qualified allocation plan, which is basically the plan that says where money goes and how money gets sort of allocated out, right? So this is an important piece around housing. And so I think it's another point of interest for us here at CHAPA to ensure that there's the changes that are happening are really being mindful of the times and the shifts and how things are actually happening on the ground. Certainly, the governor is now working on her state budget, which will be due and coming out, I think, the end of January. So this is our opportunity to be advocating around the budget and giving those acts to the legislature. So we hope to work alongside you all and thinking about the budget as well. And then we start again, right, with our legislative session and thinking about what policies, programs, and things we put forward in the next legislative session. So we look forward to working alongside you all to get all of those things done. And again, here for questions at appropriate time.
Thank you so much, Whitney. That's a lot. That's a lot.
A lot.
Does anybody have a burning question? If you think of something throughout the program, we can have more time for questions at the end. Why don't we go ahead and get started with Lorena with more info?
Thanks,
and I apologize.
Lauren.
I'm turning off my camera because my internet is unstable. So I think it's not good for me to be on video.
Sounds good. Thanks, Laura and Whitney. A lot of the themes that I'll cover on the updates for our department and the progress that we've made thus far in confronting our housing challenges relate to the regional updates that Whitney shared. This is honestly my favorite audience to speak to is people in the housing space, people that share the common goal of expanding affordability and housing stability in general in Revere. And so I will share my screen to start the presentation. Can everyone see the screen clearly, fully? Okay. The main updates that I want to share with you all are MBTA compliance zoning amendment to allow for multifamily housing by right. And following up to that is the smart growth overlay district component that brought us to compliance. I'll be going over what the MBTA communities law is about, why the state is imposing these requirements on us and other communities in the Commonwealth, and then going on to talk about the 40R districts that we've adopted as of December 2023 and what this means, or what are the advantages for developers that are choosing to opt and get permitting under the overlay district. And then I'll talk about the housing production, key recommendations and strategies that were generated from this very comprehensive housing study analysis of our housing trends, our current challenges, where we've solicited extensive community input and generated key policy areas to tackle on between our office, community nonprofits, and other key state partners. And then finally, I'll end with key opportunities in the long term as we're visioning what potential the city of Revere has to create more affordable housing and meet state goals in the housing production. So what is the MBTA Communities Law? The MBTA Communities Law mandates every 177 towns and cities across the Commonwealth to create a zoning district of reasonable size and allow multifamily housing by right. The requirements vary throughout each community. For us, we're a rapid transit community as we're serviced by 3 Blue Line stations. So our requirements are greater and more intense than other communities that have, I guess, less reliable transit than we do. Sorry, and before I get into our compliance strategy, I wanted to talk to you all about smart growth and what's this modern development approach that encourages a mix of building types and uses, diverse housing and transportation options within existing neighborhoods. It's development that occurs infill, meaning it's building on vacant lots within existing agglomerated areas rather than expanding horizontally in new land. It's not just a good housing policy, but a good environmental and transportation one, as it addresses climate change by reducing urban sprawl and single occupancy vehicles. So I've added a few words that promote what smart growth is on this slide. And one of them that I want to highlight here is the live, work, and play mantra. Well, you'll see in the past decades, new communities like Assembly Row in Somerville, or what will be Suffolk Downs in Revere, will kind of be representative of being able to be a 5-minute walkable city where you have everything close. Transit is, we have great connections to transit, public resources, shops, schools, and jobs, etc. And from a local standpoint, it also makes sense for us as we're very land scarce with a sizable portion of our land, of our developable land susceptible to sea level rise. Environmental and resilience needs were determined by the housing production plan analysis to be one of the most powerful development constraints to future housing. So looking farther ahead, we'll need to be able to change our zoning more comprehensively to allow for denser buildings to be built on smaller parcels and landward, away from the floodplain and away from the coastal low-lying areas in Revere. In addition to that, we'd like to encourage clustered single-family and multifamily housing at a higher density in our western parts of Revere and northern parts of Revere, where only single-family and two-family housing is allowed by right. And I've added this picture to give you a better understanding of the type of missing middle, more dense housing that Revere so direly needs. Recently, I wanted to point out that there's been a news article that was released where the constraints to building this type of housing are, some of the obstacles are high construction costs, where our state is well above average, and also the rising land values. So this report highlighted that single stairway buildings could be allowed for up to six stories now, compared to what exists today, which is 3 stories. And so when you have a 3-story building, the maximum units allowed for each level is up to 4 units, totaling up to 12 units. And they found that it's just not financially feasible for developers to develop 12 units because they're competing against other commercial buildings, for example, and that the researchers estimated that with this building change, if it's passed, up to 130 new housing units could be unlocked with this change in the greater Boston region in areas close to public transit. But I want to go back to our MBTA compliance strategy. With the help of MEPC, we did a lot of scenarios for what districts and where could be what proposal, and we finally reached a consensus and agreement. We tailored our strategy to be dynamic in the sense that there's different parts of the multifamily zoning district spread across Revere. So you don't have an isolated zone that allows multifamily zoning by right. There are areas in the general business district, along the Broadway corridor in yellow, and a little patch up north in the RC district. We also chose the RC2 district, the Wonderland Transit Oriented Development Overlay District, the Green Street District in purple, and Shirley Ave. And if you're looking at this carefully, for us, our requirements was that the reasonable size had to be at least 27 acres, and that 50% of the zoning district had to be within transit station area, meaning at least half a mile within the Blue Line stations. And then one other point that I wanted to mention, in addition to this strategy, was implementing our 40R zoning compliant, our 40R zoning districts, also known as smart growth overlay districts, in the Green Street neighborhood, which was formerly the Lee Trailer Park area, and on the right, the boundary showing the Shirley Ave smart growth district. I don't want to spend too much time on this slide, but just to give you an idea of the building potential, a few of you on this call might have already heard about the new luxury development that was proposed and that was approved in the Lee Trailer Park area. The address was 418 Winthrop Ave, the Pratt Street development, where the developer proposed 250 units and the city council negotiated for a merely 10% of affordability. If the smart growth overlay district had been implemented at this time, and if the developer chose to opt to 40R, these are the benefits that the developer would have had. The project would have been approved by the plan approval authority. They wouldn't have needed approval by the city council. Dimensional and parking waivers could have been granted with the planning approval authority's discretion, and 20% affordability requirement. So you would have been able to get more affordability than the approval pathway that the developer chose. And I just want to note here that the MBTA zoning change and the 40R smart growth overlay districts, they are like good strides towards our affordable housing policies, but they don't guarantee that developers will propose these plans. We'll need to attract more for-profit developers in Revere. And really the only way to ensure that we have affordable housing in Revere is through inclusionary zoning, which a lot of you may already be familiar with, as RHC threw hands in on it back in 2022 with the former proposal. And I'm sorry if I'm repeating a lot of the terminology that you already might know, but for those who don't, inclusionary zoning mandates that developers include a portion of affordable units in new constructions. It relies on the private market to generate affordable ones by offsetting those costs. And it promotes inclusivity and diversity, making sure that anyone can live in the neighborhood regardless of their income. And before I get into the examples of IZ in our surrounding communities, I wanted to share and give you a better understanding of area median income. Area median income, let's say you lined up all the households in Revere from lowest income to the highest earned. The midpoint would be the person in the middle. And for Revere this year, that number is 81,600. As you can see, it's significantly lower than the Greater Boston median, as the Greater Boston median considers area median income in aggregate of the whole region. So it includes more incomes from more affluent communities, such as Cambridge, Somerville, Arlington, for example. And then before I get into the examples, this table shows you the different affordability levels. So if households that are at 50%, 60% AMI are considered very low income, while more moderate incomes are those within 80% AMI, between 80% and 110% AMI, for example. And then I chose the 4 surrounding communities to see how they've implemented their IZ policies and where they want to give or target the policies for which income thresholds they want to serve the most. So with Malden, they have for any net increase of 8 units or more, 15% of the total units must be deed restricted to renters earning up to 50% AMI. And for homeowners, it's up to 80% AMI. In Salem, they have 10% of residential units being affordable to households earning less than 60%. In Lynn, they have 10% at 60% as well within their central business district, waterfront district, and greater Lynn district. And in Chelsea, it's a little bit more creative. They have a 15% affordability or 10% affordability if including a mix of affordable units at extremely low income, very low income, and moderate income. So across the board, all communities. Their intention was to target more deeper affordability levels, and for the inner, more core communities that are closer to Boston, like Malden and Chelsea, their affordability levels are much higher at 15%. And then the communities that are farther out, out in the outer ring, they have 10% affordability requirement. And I know that some of you might have already been familiar with the former Revere's inclusionary zoning proposal. And that's why I've included this chart, just to kind of drive the point home that the former IZ proposal really fit in well within the surrounding context. And that even though it did not pass, unfortunately, we've really made a lot of momentum in the advocacy work that the RHC coalition members have done with the Fair Housing Campaign, for example, where politically elected officials, you know, are ready to and more prepared to embrace affordability, where we have elected officials who will check their privilege and share their power with the community and listen and implement ideas. So shout out to the contributions of the RHC coalition. And next slide. This slide, I'll go over just a couple of the strategies on this list based on the strategies that are listed. The X's on the right show what goals they meet and address. The arrows that I've indicated are ones that we've already pursued and currently taking on, such as the CLT work and exploration that Laura will talk to you in the coming slides, the Revere zoning reform to support housing production that I've described with the MBTA zoning and 40R districts. We're also pursuing opportunities to support affordable home ownership. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund chair and I have launched our first-time home buyer down payment assistance program to help residents and support them in their home ownership journey. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund has also given significant amount of funding to home ownership developments like the 133 Salem Street project. They've helped to fund and give in that local buy-in to unlock state funding through the Commonwealth Builder Program. And we're also actively pursuing state and federal funding sources to support housing production and strategic growth in beneficial locations. And that's the point that we'll be sharing with our Complete Neighborhoods initiative. I have just a few slides left. So looking ahead to the future, we know that key opportunities for future housing are transforming our underutilized spaces, like the vacant lots in Rite Aid and Walgreens. They're not Rite Aid, the owner is, well, the store is closed, and we've got a grant from Mass Housing Commercial Conversion Initiative. It's kind of a slow burn, but we're looking at doing initial pre-screening, and they'll give us technical assistance for help with converting existing commercial structures and building housing on top. Other opportunities are underutilized parking spots owned by the MBTA, like in Beachmont and Wonderland. And at the bottom, there's this site at the Revere Housing's Coolidge Street property, which is probably one of the biggest sites that the Revere Housing Authority owns. And are working on an RFP with Cambridge Housing Authority on redeveloping the site. And the city will definitely be engaged and involved with the community input process as well. And lastly, another policy priority we want to focus on in terms of sustainable funding for affordable housing is the Community Preservation Act. Many communities in the Commonwealth have already adopted this act. It involves adopting a local property tax surge for funding open space, historic preservation, affordable housing, and outdoor recreational facilities. The surcharge can range anywhere from 0.5% to 3%. Seniors and low to moderate income households can be exempt from it. But really the idea is that it can be used to fund and support planning and pre-development activities as well as construction costs. And it's also a good policy because it supports a range of affordable housing mixes because it can go up to 100% of the area median income. And now if Tom's on this call, I want to hand it over to him to give you a preview on our ongoing efforts to accelerate housing development in an equitable way in the Shirley Ave neighborhood and what our hopes are for that program. Is Tom on the call?
Did we lose Tom?
I don't.
Oh, you don't see? Oh.
Let's see him. Do you want to go to me and you text him? Would you want me to just?
Can
Do you
we
want
go
to? Do you want?
Can we go to Laura and maybe Lorraine, you can text Tom and see if he can jump in?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna go to.
Lorena and I are working closely, so if you hear echoes, we're like a foot away from each other. I'm just gonna give a little bit of a placeholder here because it helps to build the narrative, and then we'll come back to Tom. But I think one of the ways the city is building momentum off that housing production plan and working on implementation is working in partnership with state partners. Definitely Mass Development, TDI, we're happy to be one of those state partners, but also at the table in a really big way is Mass Housing Partnership. And we have a director of a program there on our call, Christine, who I'll introduce in a second. But Revere was one of a few communities accepted into that program that will let them do tailored assistance. So we're gonna hold on, Chris. All right, we'll stay here. I can give a little overview, but so essentially, this allowed the city to direct a neighborhood of focus for working on this tangled issue of affordable housing in our state and working on it in a really localized way. And so it's just beginning to kick off now. Will be a few years involvement, and one of the areas of focus will be the Shirley Ave community, and I think one of the areas of focus too will be helping with local wealth building, helping small scale developers figure out how to add housing to the neighborhood and be a part of that development journey and wealth building. So Christine, I don't know if you want to just introduce yourself even briefly to the group. Luckily, through this program, we'll be engaged for years to come. So.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. My name is Christine Jordan.
You seem muted, Christine, I believe. You potentially are muted.
Can you hear me better? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you okay, Christine. I don't know about
I
everyone
can
else.
hear you.
Can anyone else hear Christine?
Yeah, she sounds
Okay,
fine.
that's okay. Sorry, Christine.
I can hear her.
Sorry.
Right now? No. Sorry. I should not have an issue. Hear me okay?
Yes, that was a me problem. I'm sorry, Christine. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Christine Mador, Director of Community Assistance at Mass Housing Partnership. So just to reiterate what Laura had said, we are providing nearly 3-year direct technical assistance to the Shirley Ave neighborhood. We're really focused on supporting property owners that are looking to add housing to their properties, and this could be on land that is either vacant or you have a commercial property right now that you would like to add housing. And some of the things that we can do is provide you with technical assistance that and feasibility. So sometimes you're not quite sure whether housing would work on your site, or you're also unsure because you've never done any residential development. So we're really here to help you navigate that process and provide some experts and bring some experts to this process, this journey that you are embarking on. So that could be architects or engineers or consultants that help you crunch the numbers to understand whether this makes sense financially. So I'm really just here to support, meet you where you're at in building more housing in Shirley Ave. And as Laura had mentioned, really supporting the area around wealth building. And Shirley Ave is a great neighborhood, and we like to continue to see it thrive. And so feel free to reach out to me or directly or through Laura or Lorena or Tom, and happy to answer any questions tonight or outside of the meeting.
Awesome. And I see Jan has her hand raised. Jan, does it let you unmute yourself and everything? We're happy to hear your question. Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I mute myself.
Okay, good.
So as a longtime resident of Shirley Ave, I'm already concerned about, I think somebody mentioned earlier, the issue with rising sea levels. I'm already concerned with overbuilding on Shirley Avenue. I live on Walnut Avenue, and there are already 3 6-story buildings, another 4-story building, another 4 6-story buildings, multiple 6-story buildings on North Shore Road. Do you think Shirley Ave is getting a little overbuilt already? I know how much more additional tall buildings we can take. I'm also concerned with the city's idea of selling some unused properties. I want to make sure that some properties are still safe, but I'm just concerned about the overbuilding of Shirley Ave. I want there to be some logic in that upcoming process, that we don't end up with a lot of mid-rises. And we still have our 2, 3, and 4-story properties. Is there a plan for that?
That's a good point. That you mentioned. Sorry. So as I said before, the smart growth overlay districts that we created, they don't ensure that housing is gonna get built immediately or at all, to be frank. And I think your comment about the environmental concerns, that those are crucial to thinking about how we're gonna be able to build resilient homes in the future. And in my role as a conservation agent, this has always been like a topic. They're changing their standards in the building code. And a lot of it might not even be environmental. Sometimes flooding occurs outside of the floodplain, and that's due to like undersized drainage systems, and just like thinking about the problem in more than just one way, that it's kind of more comprehensive. But yeah, I do understand and get your point about overbuilding in Shirley Ave, but I wanted to clarify with you that the impacts won't be felt immediately.
Yeah, and I think we're talking about a lot of these tools in a very layered way. I think that was part of why we wanted to present them in this way as an update. But just to kind of, oh, sorry, Jan, yeah.
What do you mean by the impacts won't be felt immediately? That wasn't my question. My question was, are you thinking about the fact that I don't want Shirley Ave to be overbuilt? Not that I don't want Shirley Ave to be overbuilt immediately. Not that I don't want Shirley Ave to be overbuilt in my lifetime. You don't
Yeah.
want Shirley Ave to be overbuilt. Not, I'm okay if you overbuild it slowly in the next 30 years.
Yeah. I'll answer. I think, again, this answer probably won't feel dead on to your question, but it's something I want to share as context. Just let me spit this out and then we'll kind of take it from there. But it's that part of what we're presenting here is sort of some layers of policy and assistance. And just because of the place we paused on the question, I want to clarify too, this complete neighborhoods initiative, this specific assistance we're talking about is not defining, or part of that of defining what can be built. It's saying if there's X, Y, Z rules for what can be built, who might need help accessing and working within that landscape. So that just to separate sort of certain pieces out. And then I think in terms of defining what can be built, you're talking a lot about the policy and zoning decisions that are being made, and not to say, yeah, and some of those seem to have been passed recently, and some more upcoming, that I think it's here I would defer to Laura and Lorena, but it feels like a key mission of the Revere Housing Coalition to help define those more policy-based pieces. So the only thing I wanted to point out was the distinction between the policy-based pieces and the implementation side of how are we all collectively navigating the policy. Is that so again, doesn't totally diffuse concerns, but I think it's an important distinction in terms of what we're set up to do at this point in time. And I'll pause here in case anyone else from our team would like to add in, or any other questions. Or Jan, if there's anything else. Yeah.
I think Jan's point is important. And what I have always, one of the things I've always wished for, as we learn about these zoning changes that potentially could be used to make both more fair, affordable housing and more fairness in the housing decision-making, that we understand these tools that can be used in a good way and can be shoved down residents' throats in a way that is not okay. And so what we want to do is stay at the table and, hear concerns like Jan's, and as we're going along, thinking about what are the places in Shirley Ave, because another concern that we have, Jan, and I think you would share this, is to be able to preserve the neighborhood housing that we already have. So we already have quite a few, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 apartments in Shirley Ave, where I also live. We have those smaller buildings, and my hope is that some of these policies can help preserve that what Lorena was describing as in the middle housing, without crushing the rest of us with skyscrapers over our heads, right? But the discussion goes on. Thanks for that input, Jan. Are we still expecting Tom, or are we?
He just popped in.
Oh, there he is. Yes.
Yeah, I'm here. Tom Skrelski, Chief of Planning and Community Development, for those of you that don't know me, and sorry to hop on late. I was coming off of a city council meeting. But I did hear Jan's question. Nice to see you, Jan. And a few of the points that you mentioned. Number one, on the point of selling city-owned property. So just for reference, the ones we're talking about actually selling for affordable housing purposes are all properties that are of a size that I think are producing neighborhood scale housing, 2-3 story developments, 1 or 2 family, maybe 3 family, but likely not more than that. And so we are looking at opportunities to create more of that missing middle housing that isn't just mid rises and high rises everywhere. At the same time, we've got a critical housing shortage, both in the city and across the state, and we have an affordability crisis. And the state has imposed rules for what our zoning must do to produce housing proximate to public transportation, and that includes in the Shirley Avenue neighborhood. And I would add, I don't think it's just a state mandate. I think it's one that locally we know we need to build housing. And all else equal, we want to build it closer to options for transportation that don't just confine us all to our vehicles all the time. And Shirley Avenue is one of, 3 areas in the city where we can do that. So we are going to, I appreciate the concerns about it being overbuilt, but we are encouraging development that is more dense, proximate to transit quite deliberately. And this was passed unanimously by our city council, endorsed unanimously by our planning board, and I think is a pretty broadly held goal. I think sometimes our frustrations with, let's say, the overbuilding of Shirley Avenue might stem from the fact that that building has not been accompanied by any real gestures at affordability. And I know I'm coming on this late, but I know what Lorena and Laura and others have presented prior to this, and hopefully that gives you some indication that I think we've now understand that, and we're looking to move in a different direction with the way development is. So we're building homes in Shirley Avenue and other parts of Revere for everybody across the income spectrum, and that's certainly our intent.
Thank you, because living on Walnut Avenue is like living in a canyon. There's no sign line in our apartments. The buildings are right up on the sidewalk. And it's just, it's become very depressing. And I don't want to see that for my entire neighborhood. And that's why, I mean, so few members of the city council, so few members of the planning. You guys don't live here. And you don't come visit here, except maybe to come to dinner. So you don't see this beautiful neighborhood as it was 20 years ago. And it was beautiful. So you just see the tall buildings that are down on the ocean front. And you don't see us. And I want you to see us. Come and visit us. I'll take you on a tour anytime you want, Tom.
I'll take you up on that.
We'll have to go with my dog Pratchett.
Fully aware.
Okay. I mean, I'm glad we're getting into the heart of this. It's the best thing to talk about it. And I think that your point of come be with us, to paraphrase, I think the idea is that we have active community involvement as we advance the next steps of the housing production plan. And so this forum that RHC is hosting is a great first start. And then several of these individual initiatives and potential policy campaigns, right, will also have that involvement. And I think one that we want to sort of talk about next, if there's no further questions on the Complete Neighborhoods Initiative, would be the kind of investigative work around a topic of a vehicle called a community land trust. So can you put the diagram on? Sorry, just it'll help me to have the diagram up. But again, this is not a commitment to an action being taken. We want to really dig in deeper to understand, is this an action that could be relevant to our city and to the context and the players that are already here and the momentum that's already here. I think in one of the tables that Lorena showed, where she was showing some of the tactics that came out as recommendations of the housing production plan that met multiple of that plan's goals, community land trust was one. This is, I think, all of you probably have been involved in Revere housing organizing longer than I have, and I think it's been kind of in the dialogue for years, maybe a decade, just maybe with a question mark around, could a community land trust be a fit here? And so the stage that we're engaged in is helping to answer the question of, yeah, it seems like it has potential, or let's focus our energy elsewhere. And so I'm just going to first touch on really high level what a community land trust is, and then a little bit about what's being done to kind of advance thinking around it. And so community land trust, and several of you on the call may have even worked at one or know of them, but just as a basic, it's a vehicle. It's one vehicle that we can use to develop affordable housing. It's something that can also be used to preserve open space or offer affordable commercial space. But in Revere, especially, it's being looked at for affordable housing, and it's essentially community ownership of land. And then an ability for individual or a family to own a building on top of the land with about a 99-year lease. So what this does is, because some of the value of the property is taken out of speculative market, you can never sell the land. It helps keep that property affordable as it potentially transfers ownership and is sold, as those properties usually can be sold. They can always be sold. The value that it can be sold at, the income eligibility to buy it, remains permanently affordable. And the land itself is controlled by a board, which has a makeup that about 2/3 of that board is from the area. Once the land trust is up and running, 1/3 of the board are folks who live in, if it's a case of a residential land trust, live in that footprint, and another third are residents from the broader kind of watershed or potential footprint of the land trust. And then typically the last third can also be residents, or it might be people who are somewhat considered helpful experts, right? They might be lenders, they might be real estate developers, contractors, folks from mission-aligned boards and activities to help sort of lend that expertise. And so this is geared at, in Revere, how it's being discussed is it would be geared at preserving affordability. We see land trusts take many different forms. This is where it's hard to talk specifics so early on, because thankfully cities and communities get to set a lot of the specifics, but sometimes it can come in and a land trust can work with existing tenants of a property to help them essentially transition to ownership that lets them stay in place. And sometimes it might relate to a new building or a new unit being built. So at this stage, kind of all of it's on the table in a question mark. And the local community has received a small grant from Mass Development. That's the agency I work at. Our Transformative Development Initiative has hired, through what we call our Technical Assistance Program, we get to hire consultants. We've hired someone named Harry Smith, who has experience with the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, one of the longest standing land trusts in the area. And he's supported land trust regionally, like in Chelsea and Somerville, and even consulted on land trust that, yeah, the answer was no, it's not for us. So it's not, he's had that experience, and we're going to work with him to ask some key questions about, could this be a fit here? Would it be beneficial? Taking into account the other actors we have, the nonprofit developers who are able to do XYZ, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund who are able to help in these other ways. Does it kind of fit into the mix? And so that work, that scope is being mostly directed at this point with a small planning group that really just includes RHC and TDI, and we're looking for more community members who want to weigh in on helping with that evaluation and with that assessment. So I'll leave it there, that this is essentially very early in our process, and it's an open door to kind of be part of that group, answering the question of, do we dig in further on exploring this topic? Or our energies better suited at some of the other initiatives Lorena, Tom, Whitney, and Christina have laid out. So I'll pause there to introduce, we actually have our consultant, Harry Smith, on the call. And then if he can just introduce himself, and then we can take some questions on that community land trust vehicle if there's time and if folks have it. Harry, if you're allowed to speak, if this technology will let you, please introduce yourself.
Great. Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm late. I was hoping to get on right at the beginning, and my 79-year-old neighbor had a kitchen fire. I'm trying to cook crispy fish tacos, and it was kind of an all hands on deck neighborhood thing, but everything's fine. But I came in the house and realized, oh, I need to be talking about the CLT with Revere. So my apologies for not joining right at the beginning, but it's nice to see everybody. And yeah, I think just briefly, like Laura said, I've been a community organizer, planner in the Boston area for about 30 years or so. I've worked with public housing, with co-op housing, with other types of you know, home ownership, affordable housing, and most recently was the director of the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative's community land trust called Dudley Neighbors Inc., which is one of the better known community land trusts, one of the older urban community land trusts. And so I've been for the last several years on my own working with a lot of the same groups I was working with when I was at DS&I, but really working with communities to try to decide if what their goals are around exploring the land trust model, and whether the model, how the model compares to other types of housing models out there, and just walking through with groups and community leaders whether that feels like a model that that would be useful. So I've you know, as Laura said, I'm not like an evangelist. It has to be a land trust or nothing. I think the process is, if there's a lot of energy towards a land trust, then really want to explore what are the goals, what's your vision, like do an assessment with partners in the neighborhood and within the group to say, where do we add value? Where can we really have an impact? What are our goals around setting up a land trust? I've most recently been working with Chelsea Comunidades Enraizadas Land Trust, which they set up a little while ago with the help of Green Roots Chelsea. I also was the lead on working with the city of Somerville to set up the Somerville Community Land Trust. So I've been, and in addition to working nearby in Boston and also in Brockton. And so I had proposed, you know, a series. One of the first things we do is just get together and agree on what are the set of questions you guys would want to really tackle. And I proposed some of them, and but I want to make sure we're really grappling with the right questions, because you don't want to come back in 3 months and say, why didn't we talk about this or that? So I want to make sure up front that we're hitting the key questions, and as part of that, looking at some best practices and examples of other land trusts that might be similar in communities that are facing similar issues as the groups in Revere, and engaging folks. I would hope to do one-on-one meetings with different community leaders, members of the steering committee, but also others who would be good to have conversations with, so that we're all kind of doing together an assessment of what are the opportunities and challenges around a land trust model, and then helping you guys think about next steps. And if the decision is yes, we want to move forward, then there's one set of steps. If the decision is, well, this is interesting, we want to, but we want to look at a different form, then that's fine too. But we want to kind of bring a little bit of closure, like open it up, really go through it, and then get to the point of saying, yeah, we want to do this, or you know what, right now we're working on other things, and let's hold off on the land trust for a little while, and or look at some other models. So I will stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or and Laura and others, and Lorena and Laura, if you please add anything I'm leaving out here.
Thanks, Harry. That was really great. Wow, this is a lot of information, but it also reminds me that we've come a long way. The Revere Housing Coalition pushed for inclusionary zoning in 2022, and look, just years later, the city council is very, very interested in some of these forms of zoning reform, including inclusionary zoning. And I am heartened when I hear comments from city councilors telling me directly, oh, we're going to take up inclusionary zoning again. So folks who have come in and out of the Revere Housing Coalition and felt frustration at times.
Thanks, Laura. Do you want to help wrap up? I think too, I want to confirm that was the last piece of the presenting out material. So we're squarely in the discussion, question and answer type of zone of this meeting. If anyone has anything else they want to share, or we can go back to slides to look at them closer, whatever might be useful.
If I can, Laura, one of the things I wanted to highlight that was included in the Affordable Homes Act, which I didn't go into in depth with, talked about some of the projects, the local designated projects, which basically lump together infrastructure and housing requests across the state from legislators into this one project, which was about $400 million. And just wanted to allocate to point out rather that Revere received about 11 million of those dollars for several different things. So one, about 500,000 to the Revere Housing Coalition, specific ask for 200,000 for the Gold Star Families public housing development under the Revere Housing Revere Housing Authority. And then also 5 million as it relates to the Suffolk Downs project, which is impacted by both Revere and Boston. 4 million, again, infrastructure as well as housing for the Route 1 ramp exit that goes to Malden and Revere, and 1 million for senior housing upgrades for the Revere Housing Authority's properties. So about 11 million that's going to be coming into Revere in some way or another around housing and infrastructure. You can find more details to that within the full language of the legislation of the Affordable Homes Act. But I definitely wanted to make sure that I uplifted that because, again, I think that again is a nod to you all and work that you all have been doing to ensure both in support and in tandem with the municipality and legislators, but really just to uplift that is in hopes to support. And I'm sure that's not enough. It's still more to go. And I think as we look forward to the future and advocacy, I hope to continue at CHAPA to be a partner to uplift many more of your priorities so that we can look back in the next round of the bond bill and in other parts of legislation to see even more dollars coming into the city.
Thanks. My building just got new carpets. It's nice to see the old ones go. I was wondering, do we have a list somewhere in City Hall, or Lorena, maybe you know of all of the city properties that you are thinking about selling to developers? Or is it still a maybe this one, maybe that one sort of thing? I'm wondering what the percentage is in each ward, if there are more in the western part of the city, more in part of the northern city. How spread out is it citywide?
Yeah, there's a list of 5 properties that we're selling off, and we're working with a realtor to help market the units off. But like Tom mentioned before, these are small parcels where you could only build 1 or 2 family, and you would need like a zoning variance for that.
Okay.
In terms of location where they're mostly spread out. At the top of my head, I can think of one on Bay Road. Is it Dunn Road? No, it's not Dunn Road.
There's one on Hitchcock, a couple off of 1A. They're pretty well distributed across the wards. I think the Hitchborn Street might be the only one that's actually in Ward 2. There might be one other, but like Lorena said, these are small sites. So in terms of speaking to your concern before, these are not the kind of sites that will lead to that type of development, if that's what you're.
No, I was just wondering where they are. Just, for curiosity's sake, because I had a conversation with the mayor once before about selling city property. I'm concerned about some property in Ward 2. That's being used regularly, that
The dog park?
Yeah, the dog park.
Okay, I've heard people. I'd love to in a public setting refute that. Okay. We're investing upwards of $200,000 in CDBG money. T&D supporting us with another $50,000 grant. The park is going, where the dog park is today. That site will not be used for anything else.
Okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So everybody I talked to about the dog park is like, oh no, that's going to be a condo development.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like
Question from
that's
Fatu?
hopefully part of this approach we're trying to take, where to borrow a name from Christine's program, looking at complete neighborhoods, right? Include housing, but also what are you doing there? How are you connecting with your
Right.
community? How do you live well?
Mhm.
So hopefully that's part of the spirit of everything we're doing here. And then I did see Fatu's hand up, so I wanna just jump to her next. Fatu.
So I just wanted to thank all of the presenters tonight for providing all of this information, really educative and very useful information. My question is, what is the ask here? What is the purpose of what is the action that you guys, the presenters are asking us as residents to be involved in this work? So.
Well, I'll give one response and others may have other responses. I know I wanted this to happen because I was having trouble keeping up with everything that's going on. I know I participated in the housing production plan, and I've been participating in the community land trust investigation. And I'm always thinking about the Revere Housing Coalition and Revere residents and how can we help Revere residents get more involved. And when I find myself confused, the first thing I go to is, we got to get these people to tell us what's going on. So that's how this meeting to happen tonight.
And I wasn't here for the bulk of the presentation because I was in a contentious city council meeting that was a heck of a lot more contentious than I thought it'd be. But that's also reminds me of an ask that I would have of many of the folks here, when a lot of the things that Lorena and Laura had talked about tonight, at some point in time will go in front of the city council for a vote, whether it's some of the zoning changes or selling a parcel of land to create affordable housing instead of just selling it to a developer, to do something different. You know, even did we talk about Community Preservation Act? I don't. So there's a host of really aggressive things we can do to turn the tide on housing and housing affordability, but we need loud voices, and we need a chorus. So it's not just the people here singing it. And I think Laura is right that I think on things like inclusionary zoning, people are moving in the right direction, but we're going to need everyone on this call's help and everybody that's not on this call that's interested in these kind of issues.
Thank you.
And we have we have kind of a discrete, tangible ask too of people's time as we begin working with Harry to study a community land trust. He referenced a steering committee. We're a skeleton crew right now, right? And we really could use folks just curious about the model. People who do feel evangelical about it or skeptics. We kind of want all those viewpoints represented, and there'll be kind of scaled ways to give feedback. You can participate fully in a steering committee that's going to meet very regularly and continue to meet regularly, or more as one-off conversations just to kind of dump your questions on us and sort of receive updates on a less regular basis. So that's another ask to separate from the policy considerations as well.
And if I could just jump in, and Fatu, hi, I miss you. Just to say, I think my ask is really to continue to use CHAPA as a resource, continue to come to our monthly Making the Case working group meetings where we give updates monthly on legislation and policy updates and budgetary updates. So you can hear what's going on with our legislative priorities for 2024, 2025. You can be clear on many of the work that we're doing at CHAPA events, etc. But also it's a space for you, Revere Housing Coalition, to connect with other coalitions across the state who are all coming together, learning together, growing together, sharing best practices, etc. And so I love seeing Laura there each month. We hope that many more of you all can join those sessions and we can share details for that so that you can join us. It's every second Monday of the month from 12 to 1:30. So we'll invite you all, please, to continue to do that. Be part of our committees at CHAPA, like help us inform the work, right? People want to hear the housing stories, many of the things that you all are sharing within your own work. And it's as we elevate that up into here's why this legislation and this policy and this funding needs to happen. This is what helps us when we have legislative hearings, housing for the housing committee, and these things like that. So continue to use us as a resource. And we have dollars, right? We have dollars where you want to work on campaigns and things you want to work on as the Revere Housing Coalition. Continue to use us as a resource to that. So that would be my ask.
Thank you. I've not been receiving any more emails from you guys, so that's why I'm lost. I don't know what is going on with you guys anymore.
That's gonna change after tonight.
Okay.
And I want to invite everyone to join our local Revere Community Committee. It's the third Tuesday of every month at Walden House. You can find us on Facebook at Revere Community Committee. And you can also sign up. You can get a QR code from our Facebook page and sign up from there. And we do all sorts of great activities in Ward 2. We've been active for 11 years now. Best known for the Shirley Ave Cultural Festival and starting the little free libraries in Revere. And collecting over 25 pounds of cigarette butts.
Wow.
And thank you, Jose. He just put our Facebook link in the chat. And I am wearing our colors right now, although you really can't see. We also painted a lovely mural at Costa Park. It says welcome, and it says welcome in currently 13 different languages. And if you think of one I've missed because I painted the mural, let me know and I'll paste it in.
That's awesome, Dan. Thanks for sharing. There are no other further questions. I think that's a good way to end the night. I want to thank everyone for coming, the speakers and guests who attended.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Stay
Have a
in
good night,
touch.
y'all.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you all.